Welcome back, fellow listener. Welcome back to another reading of Saga Wall City, the penultimate lecture of this novel. What is it? Saga Wall City. We are at chapter 30, so I think you already know. But if you don't know, Saga of Wall City is one of the first book for Dungeons and Dragons, the first book of the Greyhawk Adventures series, and the first book of Gord the Rogue series, and also the first book written by Gygax. Then, it is set in Greyhawk, the first setting ever created for Dungeons and Dragons, and we read them a lot. Last time we read 3 chapters, and we are 6 until the end. We have 6 until the end. And last time we see our hero Gord and his companions Curley, Greenleaf, and Chert travel to the Cairn Hills for investigate and search an ancient relic protected by a demon guardian. Then we left them inside the Tome, cairn, or crypt. I didn't know how to call it, and they have won a match against an undead priest, and they have another companion, a bear. Yeah, a bear, because Curly is a druid, so why not a bear as a friend? Then let's continue with chapter 30. Today we read another 3 chapters and we end at chapter 32, and then next time, Friday, we end the book, I think. Sorry, next time tomorrow, Saturday. I lost count. Chapter 30. The ancient stamps were hewn from the rock of the mountain itself, their chiseled edges worn smooth over the edges by persons or things that these adventurers could not guess at. Chert led the way, followed by Curly, Greenleaf, Gord, and then the huge bear, who had some difficulty squeezing his bulk through the narrow confines of the place. The quartet descended slowly, each member keeping within 2 or 3 steps of the others at all times. Gord kept count of the steps as he negotiated them, and reached the bottom and the number 90 at the same time. The 3 men funneled out at the end of the stairway, slowly turning to survey the place they had found beneath the stone barrow. They were in a natural cave, a domed grotto of circular shape. The roof of the cave was hung with long stalactites, and the floor was dotted with mounds that looked like rounded-off stalagmites, as if something had passed over them frequently. Leaning against the wall nearby were several pitch-covered pieces of wood, obviously a store of torches left there long ago. 3 passages led away from this large chamber, the entrance to each showing evidence of having been shaped by tools in some distant age. One was directly across from the stair, while the other 2 offered egress to the left and the right. None of these dark passages seemed more or less promising than the others. Which led to the demon slayer, which to the hidden relic, first known, or all. Let's go straight ahead, suggested Gord. If we come to any branchings, we always turn right. That way we can never lose our way. His 2 companions agreed, and the great bear simply followed the druid. The 4 went to the arched entry to the chosen passage and looked cautiously down its length. The magical light shed by the lodestone affixed to Chert's steel cap allowed them to see 60 feet into the tunnel, formed of a combination of natural and worked stone. A faint stirring of the air brought to their noses a putrid odor, a nauseating mixture of decay and fullness. Jurg snorted as the scent struck his nostrils. Then the bear pushed past the humans, heading down the broad passageway at a fast shuffle. Gord, Chert, and Greenleaf followed quickly, passing through the entrance one by one, and then moving into a line abreast past the structure. The corridor was about 6 paces wide, more than sufficient space for the 3 men to travel and fight side by side. With Gord on the left, Greenleaf in the center, and Chert on the right, they followed the bear, keeping within 2 or 3 pieces of Jörg's flanks. Jörg's is the bear, obviously. Once they were 30 or 40 feet inside the passage, the light revealed the wall in the distance. They were coming to an intersection where the way was no longer straight. Paths curved to the left and the right, which gave the men their first opportunity to put Gord's procedure into action. But Jörg knew nothing of such intentions, nor would he have cared if he had. The bear lumbered ahead and into the left corridor without hesitation. "It's not tells him which way to go," said the druid quietly to his companions, as they trotted to keep up with the animal. "So that's the way we go, too." The passage curved gently and seemed to be heading back in the general direction of the grotto they had just left. The clicking of the bear's claws and the pounding of the men's leather heels on the stone floor raised faint echoes around them. The vaulted ceiling of the passageway sent these sounds bouncing back and forth in a confusing manner. The noise did not seem to distract Jörg in the least, for he went on without pause, veering to the right into another straight tunnel when the corridor they were treading branched in a epsilon shape. Gord began to feel himself losing all sense of distance and direction as the Eurasian bloodhound took them right yet again into another curving branch of the passage, then along one more straight course, before suddenly coming to a halt in front of another intersection. "He pauses to sniff which way the demon lies," the druid said. "Phew!" Chert replied, and spat as he did so. "This wrecked stench is so full that the things must be everywhere." Jörg swung his barrel-like head back and forth several times, making a snorting and snuffling sound with his nose, then held his snout pointed to the left for a long second, with a grunt. The monstrous cave bear moved forward again, slowly this time, holding his nose close to the chiseled stone beneath them as he took to the left branch. Sorry, I have a problem with the Sorry for my hand. I know. Okay, good. I have a problem with work. Nothing is important. Suddenly the sound of a high-pitched giggle enveloped the group, making the humans start. At this, Jörg growled loudly, and the bear's mane of fur bristled. Gord felt horripilations on his head as well. Walking stiffly, baring his teeth and growling, the bear went on, closely followed by the 3 men. They would all soon face the demonic Cataboligne in what the man presumed would be a fight to the death. Sorry, again work. After what seemed hundreds of yards, but was certainly not that far, the curved walls of the passage once more offered a choice of direction. The correct one was evident to all at this point. However, for a dual blue-violet luminosity pervaded the air in the tunnel to the right. Then the light faded, and again louder sounded. Neither chuckle nor malign giggle this time, but a sweet peal of melodious laughter, seductively feminine and appealing, gently echoing down the passage. The bear snarled, but continued to move slowly. After exchanging glances of uncertainty, the men followed. After only a few dozen more paces, the passage turns. Cat? Okay. After only a few dozen more paces, the passage turned sharply and opened into a large and beautiful cavern. The 4 of them arrived at the entranceway at virtually the same time, and at that instant a woman's voice boomed out. "Welcome, strangers!" The speaker was standing in the center of the oval place, arms spread wide in greeting. "Since my little tricks failed to dissuade you, I have no choice but to surrender myself to your mercies, trusting that you will not slay or abuse me." This statement seemed preposterous to Gord, for the glowing blue horror which towered before them appeared capable of rending the huge cave bear to bits. Further, he could not understand why this gruesome monster spoke with a female voice through this lipless fanged mouth. Ferocity was an irony of condition, for never before had he seen anything so fully evil, ugly, and terrible. The dulcet voice made the horror of this demon more awful still. "May I come from this place of safety, sirs?" it continued. "Have I your pledge that you will not hurt me?" "Stay where you stand, woman," Curley Greenleaf ordered. "If you move from that little isle in your lagoon, we will surely slay you, even naked and helpless as you appear." Gord, feeling himself becoming confused, nudged the druid at this point, but Greenleaf ignored the contact and went on. "We seek a Cataboligne, a demon of fearsome power. If you are not such, prove it by telling us where this fiend lurks, and we might spare you." "Are you cold?" interjected the barbarian as he stared at the figure in the center of the cover. Now Gord's head was swimming. Woman, naked and helpless, lagoon, cold. What were his companions talking about? The scaled and wrinkled demon that leered from a huge horizontal populated eyes at bear and man was certainly naked of clothing, but it was most certainly not female as far as human standards went, and from where Gord stood, the thing seemed comfortable as its plied, clawed feet rested on the rock of the cavern's hard surface, a floor that displayed not the slightest trace of water, but which was strewn with a welter of bones, skulls, and other undefinable leather. Gordon tentatively put his free hand on Greenleaf's shoulder, as if to shake the druid awake from a dream. "Have you gone daft?" he asked. But before he could speak further, the demon interrupted him, and both of his fellow adventurers had their attention riveted on the figure in front of them. "Oh yes," said the thing in the cavern sweetly. "I will tell you where that nasty Cataboligne is. It hurts me, and I hate its evil. I will gladly show you the way to its lair. A place not too far from here, unless brave men fear to have a naked and defenseless woman accompany them." With that, the demon took a small step toward the four. Ur growled softly, but he did not seem frightened and did not move forward to meet the thing. Curly and Chert seemed likewise unafraid, but Gord was horrified by the approach of the Cataboligne. As he fought to retain control of his reason in the face of his terror, Gord noticed for the first time that the sword in his hand seemed to be pulsing, and in an eye blink he put everything together in his mind. The demon had somehow placed a glamour upon his companions, a magic that made them think they were facing an unclothed woman of harmless aspect. But the power of Gord's weapon overcame the humor of the demon for him and enabled him to see the creature for what it really was. Without dwelling further on the matter, Gord rapped the druid sharply on the left arm, using the flat of his blade. "Clear your brain, man!" he shouted, no longer tentative in the least. "The goddamn demon comes for us!" The Cataboligne had been fixing its gaze on the bear, taking small, cautious steps toward it with the evident intention of finishing the giant urchin before going after the man. But then the earless, egg-shaped head jerked up at the sound of Gord's desperate warning, and the terrible eyes looked on the young thief. An unspeakable fear filled Gord, and the wash of it weakened his muscles and made his knees knock together. He almost dropped his sword, but as his fingers loosened, the hilt somehow stuck fast in his hand. The demon continued to stare at Gord, but in the space of 2 or 3 seconds, the feeling of terror passed, and he felt himself able to move again. "At the bastard thing! For your lives!" he shouted, and with that cry he darted a couple of steps forward, ready to do battle. The effect of Gord's action freed the others from the illusion they had been beholding, as evidenced by their immediate reactions. Jurg roared with ear-splitting ferocity, stood erect and shuffled forward on his back legs. The druid swung a hammer free from his left wrist where it had been tongued, loosed it toward the demon in a single whirling motion, and then held his ground near the chamber entrance. The barbarian stepped up to close quarters with a terrible foe, battle axe held ready to strike. Sorry, I have still some work to do. All of the demon's intended victims were now bent on destroying the thing, but the monster was not unprepared for this turn of events. Distracted for a split second by the bear's roar, the Cataboligne failed to avoid the thrown warhammer, but even as it was struck on the body by the whirling weapon, the demon was acting to again put its attacker at a disadvantage. The blue radiance it gave off became a brief eye-sharing blue flash, and then all light was gone, including that from the lodestone on Chert's helmet. The cavern was plunged into total darkness. Sorry, work. All normal. Come close, demon dog, and feel brawl! The cry came from Chert, standing off to Gord's right between the thief and the bear. Although he was blinded, a low humming sound indicated that the barbarian was swinging his great battle axe to and from before him. The demon's response was a hideous chilling laughter, a sound like a dozen insane children in demented glee. Gord found that he could see clearly despite the blackness, although colors were not as they should have been. It took a moment for his brain to learn how to deal with things, and by then it was almost too late. "To your right, Chert!" screamed Gord. "The thing is moving between you and Jurg!" He saw Chert turn in response to his warning, just as the demon pivoted to face Gord, glaring banefully, and pointed at him with a scaled claw finger end. Instinctively, Gord took evasive acrobatic action, not a second too soon. Grey light hissed from the Cataboligne's eyes, first striking the place where he had been and then following the path of his leap and roll. Before he could rise from his half-prone position, Gord felt a strange radiance touch him. A terrible wave of pain passed through him, then his muscles were convulsed by a vicious cramping, and he couldn't move. Paralyzed, Gord could only watch what transpired next. As the demon was spending its power on Gord, the druid had been at work. Thanks to a spell guided by Greenleaf's elven's eyesight, the Cataboligne was now illumined with a pale radiance, and both barbarian and bear could see its form outlined in pale green phosphorescence. Chert was closer and struck immediately. "Brule bites!" he bellowed, leaping forward and burying his axe in the demon's scaly thigh. The big barbarian was dwarfed by the towering Cataboligne, but the blow caused the demon to shriek in pain. As Chert drew back the blade, the demon sent a stream of ugly blue darts from its fingers. These missiles struck the barbarian and he reeled backward. What the demon intended next was uncertain, for a snarling form struck it in fury, and Cataboligne and Cave Bear were locked in a tearing, clawing, biting, roaring melee. The bear's rush actually overboard the demon, and the two combatants rolled and fought locked together thus. Chert, still staggering from the effects of the strike he had absorbed, followed their path as they thrashed about the chamber, being careful not to be crushed beneath these titanic opponents, but staying ready to strike with his axe when he could get a clear target. "Move!" That word came from Greenleaf, who shouted in Gord's ear at the same instant that the thief's muscles came back to life. He had not felt the druid's initial touch, but now the healing magic at work, and he could fend for himself again. "Thank you," was all he could get out before the druid dashed off to go to the barbarian's side. Gord stood and moved carefully to gain a position where he could attack without fear of interfering with his friends. Within a few steps, the last vestiges of stiffness left his limbs, and he felt as fit as he had before. Gord could see that Curly Greenleaf was touching Chert, just as he had ministered to Gord moments earlier. At that moment, the bear gave an awful roar, shuddered and lay still. The scaly demon stood up, pulling free from the embrace of the mortally wounded Jurg. The Cataboligne was torn by tooth and claw in several places, and yellow-grey ichor dripped from its wounds. Throwing its head back in triumph, the Cataboligne howled a cry of victory. Filled with bloodlust, it ignored the man and reached down to break and crush the bear. Just then, Chert struck again. The first swing of his humming axe only grazed the demon's right arm that was reaching for Jörg's motionless body, but the barbarian recovered quickly, and the weapon's backswing took the demon on its other arm, putting a deep gash in it. The demon bellowed again, but this time his shot was not triumphant. "Come on, you blue bugger, fight me!" Chert challenged. The demon accepted, spinning with cat-like speed and swiping its uninjured arm in a clawed blow which tore into the barbarian's chest, unbalancing him and allowing the towering monster to use its wounded arm to strike and hold Chert. The demon's long claws sunk into his flesh, but the barbarian was not finished. He worked his right arm free and struck again. "Brawl!" he managed to cry as the battle axe again impacted on the demon's severely wounded left arm. This time the blade bit through, and the limb was severed from the monster's body. With a shriek, the Cataboligne leapt off and away from Chert, grabbed up its lost arm, and held it up against the place from which it had been severed. As Gord watched with a mixture of fascination and horror, the demon's sickening ichor flooded over and into the twitching arm, and the blurring seemed to occur around the wound. The demon was reattaching its lost limb. Gord was moving up to stop the monster while its attention was elsewhere, but before he was close enough to do so, a sheet of roaring flame sprang up between him and the demon. It was said that such creatures revel in fire, but evidently this one didn't. The thing roared in anger when the flames appeared, but continued to concentrate on repairing its arm. At first, the fire seemed hesitant to approach the demon's body, almost as if something prevented it from coming near. The crackling fire danced in a ring encompassing the monster, and all the while it kept working on its arm. The flames went out for a second and then reappeared, this time in a blazing mass that enveloped the thing and threatened to consume it, but too late. Now whole again, the creature raised its arms and broke them down, and as they lowered, the flames dimmed and began to die. Scorched and smoking, the demon strode forward away from the last licking tongues of fire. As the last of the flames died, so did the greenish luminescence that had weighted the demon again, making the thing invisible to those without special sight. Not hampered by the lack of light, Greenleaf advanced toward the monster, stopping less than a spear's length away and adopting a defiant stance. Chert was off to one side, back on his feet, but obviously still trying to recover from the onslaught he had suffered, and now once more left in the dark. Thanks to his word of curse, Gord could still see. As demon and druid confronted each other, Gord circled stealthily around on the side opposite Chert until he was behind the creature's field of vision. He continued to creep as the monster spoke. "Little druid, your useless spells are nothing to me. I would have used my powers to destroy all of you long before this, but I enjoy breaking such miserable creatures as you with my bare hands." The demon was speaking softly with malign persuasiveness, but Greenleaf stood immobile in front of the thing, spear held in both hands before him, refusing to flinch or show fear. "Humans beg so wonderfully, and shriek and cry when I slowly pull and break them. What fun! What joy!" The Cataboligne continued to purr heavily. One blue-clawed hand reached out slowly in Greenleaf's direction. "Perhaps I will make you into a replacement for my last servant, the one you thoughtlessly destroyed above, when I finally go free from this prison to—" "Shit mouth!" Greenleaf shouted as he stabbed his spear into the demon's slowly reaching hand. "You think I'm taken with your full enchantments of voice? Take that!" And so saying, the druid struck again, this time tearing the other grabbing hand with a keen spearhead. By this time, Gord had reached his destination behind the monster. Recoiling from the two painful spear attacks, the Cataboligne baked full into Gord's own assault. His lower back was unprotected and unprepared, and both short sword and long dagger went home, driving into their heels by the young thief's muscles and the demon's own motion. For a second, the monster continued backward, convulsed with the shock of the assault. Then it jerked forward. The dagger was yanked from the grip of Gord's left hand by the sudden move, but the sword held fast in his other hand, and the geyser of stinking ichor shot out as the enchanted blade tore free of the wound. Howling and yelling the fullest curses, the monster turned to lunge at its new tormentor. "Now, Chert, at him!" said the druid in wrathful voice, as he cast a second spell to renew the glowing on and around the demon. The first thing Chert saw was the demon turn away from him with one clawed hand pointing upward, and Gord suspended in midair, several feet away from the claws and some 30 feet above the cavern floor. Without stopping to think about what he beheld, the wounded barbarian pounced forward and sank his great axe into the monster's thigh once again. Curly Greenleaf followed with a spear thrust into the demon's other leg a split second later. The two blows hurt the creature seriously and broke its spell. Gord plummeted to the stone below. He managed to come down on his feet, tumbled to absorb most of the force of impact rolled away, and came up shaken but not seriously harmed. The demon was now terribly hurt, but it was not ready to break off and seek escape. Confined in this underground place for centuries, the monster was no longer sane, if any such thing can ever be said to have sanity. Its desire was to inflict pain and death now. This malign wish had pervaded the demon's existence, but never with such irrationality as now when it was itself suffering the pain it loved to wreak on its victims. Forgetting about its magical powers, despising flight, ignoring the knowledge that it was able to pass the door which formerly held it in prison, the Cataboligne sought only to kill the human challenging it, and to do so most hideously. Even as its body toppled forward, clipped legs no longer able to support it, the demon grabbed for the barbarian and took Chert down beside it with a swipe of its claws. The other arm lashed out for Curly Greenleaf, and scooped his body in close where the demon could maul the druid with its fangs. The sight of his friends being bloodied drove Gord into a rage. He ran forward without reservation and began raining a furious series of cuts and stabs down upon the scaly back of the prone demon. Some of the blows glanced off the thick plates of horn that covered the Cataboligne, and others were not serious wounds. Mere scrapes and pricks to the mountain of malign substance receiving the blows. Nonetheless, over a period of time that could not have been nearly as long as it seemed, Gord's small sword wrote a terrible tattoo on the demon's hide. Bluish flesh parted in places, and filthy ichor spewed forth, under the razor-sharp edge and needle-like point of the young adventurer's dripping blade. "Die, you filthy bastard thing! Die! Die!" Gord shouted over and over as he struck and hacked the demon. Then, after what seemed like an eternity, Gord heard another voice between his cries of outrage. "You can stop, friend. It is finished." Gord stopped his thrashing and looked to the side, toward the sound of Chert's voice. The barbarian was kneeling, hands on thighs, breathing heavily. Gord pulled back slowly and faced forward again, staring at the mess before his eyes. The Cataboligne's whole upper torso was a welter of wounds, and the demon was unmoving, save for occasional convulsive twitchings of its dying nervous system. Gore sputtered and stinking, Gord stood alive over the body of the monstrous demon. Alive! He looked back at his companion. "We have won, Chert," Gord said, almost not believing his own words. "We have slain the bastard! We are alive!" You and I are, Gord," said Chert, "but Curly is dead, and his great beard slain too. What a price we have paid for this victory. Oh, the druid died." End of chapter 30. No. Now I am sad. Then, end of chapter 30, we make a brief pause and then we continue with chapter 31. Stay focused. Wait a second, I have some work to do and then we continue. Sorry, today a lot of work to me. Such unfortunate. Well, the quarantine is nearly over, so pretty normal, huh? Good. Okay, good. Let's continue. So Curley is dead, and I'm sad for that because I love druids. And I can't make his voice again. Very, 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 very sad for me. Because this. You cut me out too soon! Came a weak croak from the other side of the demon's form. Chapter 31, obviously. Chert rose to his feet and took a couple of steps in the direction of the voice as Gord came around the Cataboline's body to look. Chert peered into the dimness, having trouble seeing the faint glow shed by the rapidly fading luminescence from the expiring spell. Gord could see well, however, since the magical sword remained in his ichor-stained hand, and he beamed at the sight before his eyes. "Greenleaf!" he cried. "Are you indestructible?" The rotten druid was lying several paces away from the demon, propped on one arm, blood dripping from his wounds, part of his face nearly torn off. "Quickly, Chert! We must help Curley," Gord said, taking the barbarian by the arm and leading him toward where the druid lay. "How do you know where to go in this darkness?" asked Chert. "My sword," said the thief. "So long as I keep hold of it, I can see." "But I'm blinded," said Chert. "You cannot bind Curley's wound with one hand, and I cannot do it without eyes." "We must do something, man! He's bleeding to death!" Gord shouted in despair. "I'll tell you what I see and guide you to perform the work, but hurry! Already he goes." The druid had fallen back even as Gord spoke. Lapsing into unconsciousness, in a few more minutes Gord feared it will certainly expire. Chert worked his best, directed by Gord's eyes and voice. It was a clumsy and fumbling process, consuming more time than either of the dying druid's companions meant to take, but it was all they could do. Finally, Chert finished. He had managed to close the torn cheek and staunch the flow of blood from that wound, and the worst of the others covering his friend's body. Both young men were themselves wounded and bleeding. Chert worse than Gord, but both ignored their own pain and bleeding to save Greenleaf. Then suddenly Gord remembered something. "He has a healing salve!" Not bothering to waste further breath, Gord tore the pouch from the druid's belt with his free hand. Then, moving his sword from right to left, he managed to get the jar out of the bag and held it tightly. "Use your hand to work the top open," he commanded the barbarian. After a bit of groping, Chert managed to get the thing open. "Put a bit on your finger and then I'll guide it to a bleeding wound," he instructed his companion. "If this doesn't work, then it is all over for him." Carefully using his free hand, Gord used the barbarian's outstretched arm, hand and finger as an instrument for applying the ointment. The stuff had an odd pearlescent sheen to Gord's humoured eyes, but this disappeared as the thick salve was spread on the torn face of the comatose druid. As the salve's brightness and color faded, the flesh upon which it was spread joined at the edges, closing cuts and gouges. In another moment, blood no longer flowed from the ghastly wound. "It serves him well, Chert. Now we must have more for his other wounds." The process of groping and smearing continued until the small pot of ointment was utterly empty. The druid was still in critical shape, covered with small untreated wounds, and blood-smeared, but blood was no longer coursing from him, and Gord thought he might yet survive. The two young men sat back in the underground place, exhausted. Now they must wait. Using some of their water, both men cleaned their own wounds as well as they could under the circumstances. They also drank some, to quench their thirst of battle and clear their mouths and throats of the horrid taste left by combat with the demon. Gord sat down close to Greenleaf, still clutching the sword so that he could keep a vigil for the unconscious druid. Chert stretched out beside Gord on the stone floor, intending to keep his friend company while he started to recuperate. But weakness and fatigue got the best of him, and shortly began to snore. Gord was dozing lightly himself when, some time later, a welcome sound broke him alert. "Guard! Guard!" The thief came close to Greenleaf's head, for the druid could barely manage a whisper. "What is it, Curley, dear friend?" "Silence that blaster over there," the fellow managed to say with a bit of spirit. "It's keeping me awake." Gord was flabbergasted at this attempted humor, and for a moment lost track of what else Curley was saying. "I said, hold me in a sitting position, you idiot," the druid groused. "Seeing that you two have somehow brought me back from death's door, I have to do this quickly, or that bunny bastard will get his fingers on me and pull me back inside again." Gord was afraid to move the druid, who was still not well off, but his demeanor left no choice but to comply. The druid managed to get a sprig of vegetation from inside his robe, and he muttered some chant under his breath, as he waved the staff slowly back and forth over his body. After 3 such passes, the druid relaxed. "This better, much better," he said in a stronger voice. "Many thanks to you, Gord, and now I must close my eyes." Gord started to protest, not understanding his meaning, but the druid reassured him. "I am all right. I tell you, not well and whole, but I will live if you'll only allow me to sleep a bit, damn it. Why don't you imitate that great hulk over there?" he concluded, "and allow me to do the same." With that, the fellow lay back and fell asleep almost instantly. Gord had nothing better to do, so he also allowed slumber to take him. How long he rested thus, chilled and hashing on the cold stone of the cavern floor, he knew not. He was roused by the sound of Greenleaf talking to Chert. "Now sit there," the druid instructed the big adventurer, "and I'll see to Sleeping Beauty over there." "I am awake," Gord informed the approaching druid. Curley, who appeared to have never been wounded, said, "I can see well enough, thank you, to detect your awakened state. How badly are you hurt?" Gord allowed that he had felt better, but that besides the claw wounds on his arm, there was nothing but scrapes and bruises troubling him. "Can you move freely and well?" Greenleaf asked. "Yes, and without much pain, save for the arm." "The arm will have to wait then, Gord," the druid told him. Chert was sorely hurt by the demon, and how he managed to stay conscious and assist you in saving my life is a wonder for a bard's song. My work has brought him around to fair state, but if I can aid him yet further, we can leave this place to serve as the sepulchre of demon and bear, bless Yerk's brave heart, and seek our prize. This was most agreeable to Gord, and as soon as the druid had gone through his riddle of healing over the barbarian, the three went from the place. They were tattered, sore, and still stank of fullness from the Cataboligne, but they went with pride and gladness in their hearts. A demon was defeated and dead behind them, and somewhere within the maze before them was a great treasure. With Gord and Curley taking turns leading Chert through the blackness, they made their way back to the grotto and picked up the torches they had seen there earlier. Then, in several hours of casual wandering, they investigated the whole place. The central grotto had 3 exits, as they already knew. Each exit led to a curving passageway, and each of these in turn had 3 exits. The connecting corridors tied 3 such circular ways together, but the passages that did so were offset and asymmetrical, rather than being like the spokes of a wheel. They covered all the curves and corridors systematically, concluding with a second trip around the outer rim of the third wheel-shaped passageway, which took them back to the tunnel leading to the chamber where the Cataboligne's corpse lay. After going some distance farther, they came upon another tunnel that led them to a somewhat smaller cavern. The place contained no treasure, but there they found a deep, cold pool of water, and all 3 had a chance to bathe and clean themselves of the wrecking remnants of their terrible encounter. Refreshed and feeling far better than they had in some time, the three adventurers moved on. Going on to their right, they passed the position where a third opening would have been had such a thing been there. But the wall was unbroken, and they eventually came around to the area of the Tomb of the Demon and Beer again. Something was wrong. Either they could not find the treasure, or else, as Gord speculated at this point, someone had added the relic to the tail of the cairn to enliven it. That is most unlikely, Curley stated flatly. The tablet I translated said that there was a most powerful item here, and the whole place seems made to contain it. What madness caused the servants of this place to ward it with a demon, I can't say, or even hazard I guess at, but the dead bandits carried nothing forth, and their surviving fellows claimed nothing either. Why else tell stories for your supper? If bandits fled demon, then demon guarded treasure. Thus, the druid reasoned, we have missed its hiding place somehow. How? Chert demanded in an impatient tone. It's right, Curley, Gord said. If the storytellers said they saw wealth here, any treasure would have to be in plain sight, or else taken away, or hidden by the demon. Spirits lifted by this sudden inspiration, they returned to the demon's cover, the only place they had not searched thoroughly, and looked it over carefully, but besides the dead, there was nothing in sight. They rested a few minutes and pondered. The Cataboligne used illusion, the druid said. Then must we assume that an illusion hides the relic? No, not necessarily, Gord, but it's a good start. When I held my sword fast, the demon's spell affected me not, the young thief pointed out. Yet I saw through no illusory cover to a treasure beyond as we searched this maze. You weren't holding your sword, Chert informed his friend. I wasn't? I wasn't! Gord exclaimed in reply. He had grown so accustomed to having the sword in his grasp that he failed to immediately realize that he had sheathed the weapon and used normal sight in their explorations after the torches were acquired. Gord felt foolish, but neither of the others blamed him for the oversight. After all, they had not thought of it either. Greenleaf stood erect. Let us do it all again, friends, he said, and this time Gord will employ the humor vested in him by his blade to see if we have been duped. The circuit seemed longer and more tedious than they recalled from their first passage, but they went around again, up and down passages, from core to outer circle. Finally, back at the spot where they thought a tunnel should have been, Gord's magical vision revealed to him that a loosely piled stack of blocks closed an opening in the wall. What do you two see here? Asked Gord, pointing to the place. Here, rock wall, the druid said. The same, a stone wall, Chert agreed. Gord tapped on the place with his knuckles. Look again and try to see what is really there. It is a passage blocked by stone slabs. The barbarian shook his head, then grinned. I see it now, Gord, he said, clapping his hand on his friend's shoulder. Curly Greenleaf, despite closing and opening his eyes and shaking his head several times, could discern nothing, but this did not prevent him from lending a hand by feel alone. And as soon as enough of the stone was tumbled aside to allow entry, all three passed through, the druid remarking how soft the rock had become as he pushed his hand in front of him, still unable to believe what he was doing, even though he realized that the stone was phantasmal. There was a short passage hewn through the rock, and then it opened on a natural tunnel, which Curly, much to his relief, could see. This passageway in turn allowed them entry to a cave beyond. The entrance to the cave showed signs of being worked. Stones had been wedged together to form a crude archway, which indicated both that the rocks in this area were not terribly strong and that someone apparently cared about keeping the tunnel from collapsing. The flickering light from the torch Chert Curley showed the adventurers that the place was some 30 feet wide, but the other end of the oblong cave was hidden in darkness. The feeble illumination of the torch could not pierce from where they stood. Hold that thing higher, Greenleaf commanded. Chert complied, and the circle of illumination spread forward a few feet, faintly showing broken stone and some other indistinct shapes on the floor ahead. What's there? Gord asked, pointing toward something glittering. They stepped a few paces ahead cautiously, then quickly recoiled from a hissing noise that rose up from the perimeter of the lighted area. There, confronting them, were fully a dozen pale adders, each as long as Chert was tall. Both young adventurers prepared to defend themselves, for the reptiles were still hissing furiously and now advancing toward them. Curly Greenleaf stood still and began chanting some strange verse, the sound of which seemed to attract the snakes and make them even more aggressive. Several of them slathered toward the druid, intent on sinking their fangs into his flesh. Gord sliced the head from the one nearest the rotund fellow, shouting as he did so for the druid to retreat. Chert axe caught 2 at once. Chopping them both in half, still Curly remained motionless and kept chanting, "Serpent mine, wood and wine, overscale, back prevail." The druid ended his incantation on a rising shout and waved his hands before him, scattering bits of mistletoe leaf as he did so. Gord and Chert stared at the result in amazement. Where before there had been angry adders, now only twisted sticks remained, lengths of wood that bore an uncanny resemblance to the vipers. Curly Greenleaf beamed with professional pride as the weapon wielder stood speechless. "A little something special, my lads," he beamed. "Most can make snakes of sticks, but it is rare indeed to have the reverse on the tip of the tongue. Those billets will serve well as torchwood too." Curly's self-congratulation was halted by a great slattering sound followed by a hissing so loud it seemed as if the whole cave were filled with snakes, and that was not far from the truth. There came from the darkness more slattering sounds of mammoth scales on stone, and then the trio was confronted with the largest serpent any of them had ever seen. Mother had returned, and she was not happy to find her young so roguely handled. "Now, Curly, let's see the trick again, and quickly!" "We fight or flee, lads," the druid said as he pulled out his spear and backed slowly toward the entrance. "I can do that spell but once." Weapons at the ready, the other two moved slowly in the same direction, willing to give the angry snake its run of the cave. If they could keep it at bay by retreating slowly and then draw it into the narrow passage, they would have the advantage. In such a confined space, the serpent would not be able to coil and thus strike from a distance, and they could close on it and cut it to pieces, before its poisonous fangs did their work. The adder was not so cooperative. However, it was coming forward in a coiling rush, determined to not drive off but rather devour the creatures who had dared enter its nest and destroy its offspring. Chert acted equally quickly, dropping both axe and torch and picking up a large rock off to his side. "Eat some stone!" he shouted at the adder as he raised the missile over his head with both hands. Then he heaved the head-sized slab with all his strength, plunging it directly into the open mouth as the giant reptile lunged. The missile snapped off a fang as it flew into the serpent's gaping maw. The snake recoiled, trying to spit the rock from its mouth, and writhing from the pain of its impact upon both fang and mouth. Greenleaf jabbed at its darting head with his spear, while Gord sought desperately for some vantage point from where he could attack such a creature with effect. A small sword such as this was not likely to be effective against so huge a snake. Chert's torch was guttering out on the floor, its flames dying and the illumination dropping. The barbarian hurried to grab and other stone missiles and regain the torch before it was extinguished against the rock. The second chunk of stone was larger than the first, but he managed to hurl it with such power and aim that it flew as far as the other and again struck through. More of the fangs within the huge snake's mouth were broken. Instinctive concerns of motherhood now gave way to another instinct, rage. The adder shook its head to clear the second stone, giving Chert the precious few seconds he needed to regain the torch and his axe. Then the snake struck back at its foe with blind fury. Its wedge-shaped head lashed forward with lightning speed, propelled by the massive power of a 60-foot-long body as thick as the trunk of a 100-year-old oak. Chert darted backward and to the side just as the snake committed itself to the direction of its lunge. The dreaded jaws snapped shut on thin air, and the serpent's massive head continued onward to smash into the stonework at the edge of the cave entrance. No doubt hurt but undaunted and still enraged, the snake recoiled for a second strike. As Gord and Curley scurried away from the tunnel they had sought to reach, Shertis, back to the wall near the tunnel, succeeded in baiting the creature to come after him again. This lunge had much the same result as the first. The injured reptile was slightly off the mark, and instead of hitting Chert, it again drove its head into the wall near the entrance. This time it was a glancing blow, and the force of the thrust was not entirely absorbed by contact with the wall. The adder's head ricocheted off the corner of the entranceway and into the narrow passage. Before it could withdraw its head, a rain of stone fell upon the snake. Weakened by the first smash, the rock gave way from the force of the serpent's second impact, and the hundreds of pounds of rock rushed down. This was not fatal in itself, but the blow so hard and infuriated the reptile that its thrashing efforts to withdraw the pinned head served to cause still greater collapse. Within a few more seconds, a small avalanche of rock tumbled down to completely trap the adder. "Strike while it is held fast!" bellowed Chert, who was standing off to the side preparing to do just that. "Get back!" the druid shouted, particularly to Chert, for the writhings and coilings of the serpent's enormous body were unbelievable. All three hastened to save themselves from being crushed or battered by the lashing and twisting body. The feebly burning torch suddenly went out altogether, leaving Chert without guidance save for his ability to locate the sounds of clattering rock and the titanic thrashing of the trapped snake. Wisely, Chert dropped to the floor, and Gord could see the form of his big friend prone and rolling across the cave floor. He watched until the barbarian's body came to a sudden halt against the side wall, some distance from the entrance and also comfortably away from the thrashing body. So Chert was safe, and it seemed that Curley was out of harm's way also. For the druid had crept into a low spot some distance from the passageway, and the huge body could not touch him in its flopping and whipping. Gord himself had been moving up into the cave, going in the direction of the adder's tail when the avalanche came, and he was presently in the most danger. Gord stood flattened against the wall, doing his best to hide, to avoid being crushed by the contortions of the dying monster. He dared not move too far or too quickly, feeling himself overcome by an irrational fear that the snake's body could see him and would seek him out if he made himself evident. So he stayed more or less where he was and endured, for what seemed like hours. At last the thing was still, and the cave quiet. Gord and Curley joined up and walked across the cave to where Chert had sought refuge. The druid stood silently for a moment, and the place became dimly illuminated by the now familiar phosphorescent green glow, this time coming from a portion of the dead reptile's tail. "This is the best I can do for you, Chert," said Curley. "Gord and I will guide you if need be." "I have eyes to see in this light," the barbarian replied as he clambered to his feet. "What do we do now?" asked Gord somewhat plaintively. "The damned snake has closed off our escape from this place." After long hours of effort and tension, he suddenly felt trapped and even doomed. Curley would have none of such an attitude, however. "First, we gather up our prize," the druid said confidently. "Thereafter, all we need to do is find the exit that the dead adder used to go hunting." That made perfect sense to both of his young companions. So greatly heartened, they explored the small cave. It was a small place compared to the caverns they had previously explored in this place, but the space was long and had many side openings. It took only little time to locate what the druid sought. Within a recess near the middle of the main cave there was a chest of ancient origin, much discolored by verdigris. Gord was able to examine it and find where an incautious hand would be pierced by poisoned needles, and opening its primitive lock was mere child's play for him. Within the chest lay yet another coffer, one of gleaming wrought gold. They removed this from the heavy chest with great care, with respect both for its contents and for possible traps laid to protect the prize. "What think you, lad?" Cornleif asked the young thief. "Can you open it safely?" "I am not sure. See the glyphs graven around its top? And there, by its catch, are yet more runes and sigils. I have seen such before, or writing similar, I should say, and they bode ill for any who violate them. It is my thought that we take this out of here unopened and see what is therein in some place where we have better chance of for safety. It is a good plan, Chert agreed. This thing fairly reeks of some humor I like not. Then let's take it and find our route to light and clean air, the druid said cheerily. I am sick of this dark and gloomy place, and long to see sun and trees again. End of chapter 31. And begin of our second pause, and then we return for the last chapter of today, chapter 32. Okay, good. We begin our last chapter of today. What do you think? Do you want? I'm very thirsty this day. Okay, last chapter for today is a brief one. Chapter 32, let's begin. After many wrong turns, retracing of steps, the three eventually managed to find their way to the surface. Greenleaf used his skills as a ranger to follow the route, or rather routes, the serpent had used. This in itself was not a difficult task, but locating egress to the outside was time-consuming because of the reptile's propensity to meander along many subterranean passages that also led to and from the cave. There was no way to tell whether a certain passage actually led up to ground level without trying it, and there were several to choose from. Thus, it took a while for the hardy trio to make their escape. As Gord moved briskly along the tunnel toward the exit, he wondered out loud what had prevented the demon from escaping by this same way. Curly Greenleaf suggested that some eldritch command from ancient days edged the whole place so as to allow the Cataboligne only one means of freedom. Otherwise, the demon could surely have used its great powers to move itself by magical means to wherever it chose. They came into the bright morning through a long, down-slanting tunnel of natural stone. Stepping out upon a grassy slope that overlooked a mountain valley far below the cliff they stood on, it was evident from the position of the sun and the roll of the mountain peaks that they were on the western side of the place. Their route back was lost to them, and their horses too, and now their only recourse was to somehow manage to get westward and out of their mountains on foot. Fortunately, all three men were used to climbing, although Gord was by no means the outdoorsman that his comrades were. Although Chert's bow had been broken during his final struggle with the demon, both Curly and the young thief still had slings, and finding good stones to use as missiles was no problem at all. They walked and climbed downward, heading in the direction of the setting sun, watered by mountain freshets and fed on small game brought down by slungstones. They had occasional encounters with things far more dangerous than a rabbit or a grouse, but by avoiding some or using spells and weapons to defeat the predatory purpose of others, the trio managed to gain the foothills several days later, with the golden coffer still safe and sound, hidden in a wrapping of old cloak and strapped on Chert's broad back. They trudged farther west, seeking an inhabited place where they could refurbish and replenish their clothing and gear, find mounts and seek what they needed to safely examine what the coffer contained. When they came to a place where a large marsh spread northward as far as the horizon, the druid said they were near the border between the lands of the city-state of Greyhawk and the area controlled by Hardby, a wild territory but at least one containing communities where they might locate their needs. Moving with great caution and keeping sharp watch in darkness, the three adventurers managed to walk the next 20 leagues without incident. Early the next morning they saw signs of habitation on the horizon, and when they finally entered the village of Serpentar at midday, all three rejoiced. They had accomplished their quest. And now the matter was all but complete. Gord provided the coinage for their needs, although not without some grumbling and dark looks. The barbarian and druid had no more than a few copper commons between them, so their companion had to tap his secret cache of orbs and platinum plates. Early on the following day, mounted on good steeds, newly clothed, rearmed, and rested, they rode along the highway that wended its way beside the Celentine River. Celentine River. Fuck off. This watercourse was the western outlet of the Great Nire Dive, emptying that lake and running southward to pour its waters into Woolly Bay. This way was an artery of commerce, whether waterborne or otherwise, and the road was both well used and frequently patrolled. Better still, it was dotted with hamlets, villages, and even towns, so that the 120-mile posts they passed were not marks of a hard journey, but rather points along a rather comfortable ride between various inns, taverns, and hostels. No one questioned three such men, nor did any highwayman or bandit gang cross their path. They kept to themselves and likewise were allowed to do this, Such hardened and armed riders were let alone by outlaws, and were too few in number to concern soldiers bent on maintaining law and safety. For 3 apparent mercenaries were of no interest in a land where such were common. The sight of Greyhawk's high wall and strong towers brought a flood of memories to Gord's mind. How long since had he left the city, bound for fortune and adventure? Only about 8 years of real time, he reckoned. 8 years that seemed to hold a lifetime worth of joy, sadness, fear, and all the experience between those extremes. Will the city have changed much? He doubted it. Was his old friend, son, happily wed? Perhaps a ranking thief of the guile by now? What of the rebellious Teline and Sunray? Gone, he supposed, either to another place or to whatever lay beyond death. The word death brought to mind the beggar master's bones and a heavy box of plate iron resting together in a dark cistern below the city. Gord had originally left the city to avoid the suspicious guildmaster of thieves, but he thought Aurentol would neither recognize him after all these years, changed as Gord was, not have any particular interest in him. Whether he would even be remembered at all was as much a question as whether or not he cared about such long past matters of little real import. What finally struck Gord was that other than during his short episode as a student, a period of time all too brief it seemed in retrospect, he had never really had a home in Greyhawk. The city had merely been a place where he housed himself, or rather was forced to live, in his miserable youth. Did he hate this metropolis, or did he love it? Perhaps he was indifferent to it entirely. He will soon discover which Gord suspected when he was once again within its walls. Even if the city had not changed much, Gord knew that he had. Possibly it would mean something entirely different to him, with his perspective altered by years and travel, and much more. With the image of Eva Lake's silvery hair and violet eyes playing across his mind, Gord passed through the massive south gate and into Greyhawk. "What is your raid, priest?" asked Curley, trying to keep the anxiety he felt out of his voice. "It is confused, druid, but not evil, I think," the robed cleric replied with some uncertainty. "And you, magician, what can you tell us?" The dun-clad magic user scratched and tugged at his long, scraggly beard before saying hesitantly, "The stuff written upon the lid of yon coffer is potent, but it is done in runes so ancient I cannot be sure. Yet I find no foul word in there, no cures, no sigil bringing some doomer of ill. There is a magical aura, certainly, one of the strong sort, which I am prevented from reading by its own might. Beyond this, I am powerless to assist." Gord, in an exercise he had become accustomed to of late, counted out gold into one outstretched palm, platinum lozenges into the other waiting hand. The cleric and the magician went their separate ways, departing happily, for they had been quite richly rewarded for their somewhat questionable answers. "This had better be some treasure indeed," the young thief said meaningfully to his comrades. "The sums I have had to fork over to suit you and prepare for the discovery of this chest's contents are easily equal to the value of this antique coffer itself. If it holds aught of value, you two are out of luck, for I claim the box itself as a repayment of expense." "Of course, Gord," the rotund druid said with a casual wave of his hand. "I am sure I can speak for Chert too when I say that it is nothing to us. A trantulum justly yours for the gold you have spent to complete our quest." The massive barbarian frowned at the druid's easy manner in giving so expensive an object to repay the costs that Gord had to stand, but he did not contradict his friend. Perhaps he felt that Gord should turn some profit for his funding of this project, but it did seem excessive, and Gord looked entirely too pleased with Greenleaf's acquiescence to his claim on the coffer. "What need for all this talk?" Chert said impatiently. "If we are ever going to open the thing, let us get to it now. No amount of pondering serves further. Spellbinders have been of scant help, and it is time for direct action. If you two are hesitant, I shall brave the unknown and get to the heart of it by going within. So saying, he walked purposefully toward the small table upon which the gold box rested. Wait, said Curley quickly. I must bar the door, so we do not have unwanted intrusion by some chambermaid or servant. Then we shall all have a hand in unlocking the coffer and lifting its lid. Gordon knew they had done right in not hastily forcing the box open when they discovered it. Caution is always preferable to impulse in such circumstances. Still, it was hard for him not to feel a bit foolish and disappointed, and he supposed the others must feel much the same, when the adventurers finally realized, by judicious application of prying dagger tip and strong barbarian fingers, that the coffer came open fairly easily and without adverse incident. Apparently the trap on the larger chest that Gord disarmed had been the only real protection on the treasure, save for a stubborn lock or two. When the coffer of wrought gold was opened, another container of thin, age-darkened silver was revealed nestled within it. This also proved to be fairly easy to breach, and when it too was opened, the druid examined its contents visually for a couple of moments. Then he gingerly took out the extensive array of gems that all but filled the box, and arrayed them on a blanket. Here, Curly Greenleaf said, placing down a huge sphere of uncut yellow corundum, is the great globe of our sun. This emerald orb here is Oert, I think. That opal represents Luna, and the sapphire of smaller size stands for the blue disk of Selene, he continued, placing each piece in its correct relative position. These various stones are the spheres which accompany our world in its circuit of the sun. These round diamonds are stars, and the little black opals the various moons and other celestial bodies whirling and spinning their pathway is through the system, he concluded, not bothering to specifically place each of the smaller pieces. What such imitations were used for is lost to us now, lads, but they represent a fortune to us all. What of this? Gord said, pointing to but not touching a strange object still within the box. The thing was a mesh of twisted wire made of an unknown metal that shone with a bluish silvery sheen. Held fast within the roguely spherical mass of wire was an oddly formed and strangely convoluted piece of something that seemed neither natural nor made by human hand. Chert began to peer closely at it, likewise avoiding actual touch. The thing inside seems to absorb light, whatever it is, and looking close at it makes my eyes ache and my mind feel wrenched and turn as the shape itself. Stop looking, so! The druid commanded, hastily pushing the barbarian away from his close scrutiny of the object. Obviously, this is the relic we sought, which, even considering the value of all these gems, is the real treasure here. It has unknown powers, force unguessable. Leave it for those who are more able to understand and contend with such things. Then what are we to do? Queried Gord. Is it to remain forever an enigma to us? No, my good friends, Greyleaf said as he tucked the weird thing into a small bag of heavy silk, embroidered with the signs of potency to druids. You shall know what it is, and be paid handsomely too for its recovery, but it is work I alone must accomplish. Now it was Gord's turn to glower suspiciously at the druid, but the young thief's unease at Curly's statement was not shared by Chert. What will you do, then? The hulking barbarian asked mildly. Curly Greyleaf had notified Gord's suspicion, so he chose his words so as to reassure the thief, and explain his intentions to them both. I plan to depart Greyhawk this very day. Once in the countryside, I shall use my powers to travel in other forms, or through the good trees hereabouts, to return to the Celadon and the Archdruid there. He will undoubtedly wish to involve even more powerful ones of our order in this. Perhaps even the great Grand Druid himself. Who knows? All of this will require some time, weeks, perhaps months. As soon as possible, I shall send word to you both, and whenever I can, I shall return personally to you both the knowledge gained and the rewards you so justly have coming. Here the druid paused and turned, looking down upon the many gemstones that had been with the true prize. Of these baubles I have no need, he said. Gord, if you will give me a few more coins, I shall have sufficient money to see me through to the forest precincts where such stuff is unneeded. You and Chert, meanwhile, will certainly find some use for the price these jewels will fetch here in Greyhawk. May I divide them in equal shares for you? Readily agreeing to such a pleasant prospect, the two young adventurers watched their husky associate carefully examine and separate their many-colored array into two smaller piles. Diamonds, rubies, emeralds, sapphires, and so forth. Even a large jacinth, the Curley explained, must represent the planet of Rao, greatest of the celestial spheres in the family to which Earth belonged. Happy and satisfied, the little thief and the big barbarian saw their comrade off, wishing him speed and safety on his journey, and saying that they would be looking forward to his return in the days ahead. The druid was not far away before the two eager adventurers were heading for the gem market in the high quarter of the city, bent on extracting every orb of gold, yellow gold they could in exchange for the precious stones secured in their purses. Both were whistling and logging, happy indeed, as they entered the first of the many shops that traded in precious metal, gemstones, and jewelry meant to please the nobles and rich folk of the great city of Greyhawk. End of chapter 32. And for today, we end here. Tomorrow, Saturday, we end our first Gord the Rogue novel. So don't miss it. Only tomorrow, Saturday, at I don't really know the hour at which I read. Anyway, for today is all. Have a nice evening, dinner, night, everything, and bye.